And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Happy Thanksgiving to our Canadian listeners. Week 1 of the new fantasy hockey season is in the books. It's time to look ahead to Week 2, brought to you by our good friends over at Skip. Welcome to another edition of NHL Fantasy on Ice, Week 2 waiver wire edition. Nick Alberga and Jay Kahn with you. Plenty ahead on today's episode. As per usual, Pete Jensen is coming up in a few minutes for a look at this week's waiver wire list. Also, we'll answer some of your burning questions, dissect this week's schedule, and hit you with some betting plays. What's going on, Jake?
Not too much, Nick, and enjoyed a little Thanksgiving weekend up here in Canada, and looking forward to getting into this stuff with you and overreacting a little bit to week 1, of course, brought to you by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Overreacting is right, my friend. We'll start with the cold starts, and we're going to have some cold leftovers here for the remaining of the week for Thanksgiving, but Edmonton 0-3-0, Colorado 0-2-0. Remember those Nashville Predators who picked up everybody and their mother on July 1? 0-2-0. Who are you most worried about, Jake?
Oh, man, I love this time of the year for these types of conversations, right? Nashville, I'm not shocked they've come out of the gate slow, Nick. I think they tried to do a little bit too much in the offseason. Eventually, I feel like it'll work there, but I'm not surprised. I'm a little bit worried about Colorado. I'm curious your take. I don't think I'm full panic button, but look at lines 2, 3, and 4 on Colorado, Nick. Like who's scaring you in that lineup outside of the top dogs? I think their depth issues are getting severely exposed here.
The answer is Casey Middlestat. Okay. It's got to be Colorado. First and foremost, Edmonton started this way last year. We all saw what happened. So I think they're trying to revisit history there. To me, it's Colorado for one reason and one reason alone. And it's not like it's Edmonton's great at it either, but goaltending. Like when you're at a point where you're going to pick up Kaapo Kähkönen on the waiver wire, you got some major league issues. Like I'd be worried if I was Ville Husso right now as we have this conversation. He's on waivers.
Oh boy. That just reeks of desperation already from the Avs, and it's not just goaltending. I mentioned the depth issues, Nick. You know, even we could take it to the back end. It's something they're gonna have to figure out as they go along here. You mentioned it with Edmonton. This is just what they do. They start we were talking to producer Bob, but before he brought up a good point, something I talk about all the time, that you play these high intensity playoff games, Game 7, Stanley Cup final. Like the intensity is just through the roof, and then you got to get up for like an October, midweek game. But they got to figure it out quickly. I don't think you want to dig yourself too deep of a hole, and they're making this yearly tradition in Edmonton, it feels like.
I don't buy the excuse, Jake. We do this podcast twice a week. I get up for every podcast. I'm ready for a third one, quite frankly. But hot starts, we love this. Every year we look, the Vegas Golden Knights 3-0 once again. Winnipeg's been a mild surprise for me because of the personnel change, new coach in the mix there in Scott Arniel, and they're 3-0. Obviously Connor Hellebuyck off to a hot start. Then you have Calgary. That's a major story. Utah and New Jersey. Who's the most surprising team for you thus far?
Well, I mentioned Calgary on one of our episodes last week as a team that we might be able to back, I think, in October and November at some pretty big prices. And I don't know if I expected 3-0 and what I've seen from the Flames, but I just had a feeling that this team was going to surprise some people this year, Nick, right? Everyone's writing them off saying they're going to be in the draft lottery. Just go look at that roster. There's some proud veterans on Calgary. So I don't think we should be too shocked that they're competitive here out of the gates. Will it result in a playoff spot? We're a long way from that. But Calgary, to me, I think is the best story, and a team I'm going to continue to back until further notice.
Myself included, all I could think about was Ryan Huska being live for the Jack Adams. And then on top of that, Andre Tourigny, a pick of Michael Leboff, good friend of the podcast. I think he was a year early on that pick. Like if Utah keeps this up, Jake, I think Tourigny's winning this award. I know there's 79 games left, but I actually believe in Utah this season.
Dylan Guenther's goal projection is now up to 70, maybe 75 goals with what he's doing there. It's just incredible. Every single game generating so many shots on goal, and his finishing ability as well. I'm very bullish on Utah and what this team could do, because Arizona flashed talent the last couple of years, and now you get out of that building fiasco and you got a legitimate place to play and an inspired fan base. I would not be shocked if we see playoff hockey in Utah in year 1 right now.
That was a wild game on Broadway. My only question leaving Canadian Thanksgiving weekend was, would they be able to fit Utah Hockey Club, the entire name, on the Stanley Cup? But I think naturally from a fantasy perspective, Jake, a lot of people asking, like, is it sell high time? Obviously, we both believe in Utah. I think defensively, they're a work in progress. Like if you own their crease, I'm a bit skeptical that the wins will continue. But Dylan Gunther leads the NHL with 5 goals. Logan Cooley has 5 apples, tied for first in the league. Clayton Keller at 6 points, tied for first. Are there any of these guys you're looking at that maybe you would think about like selling high right now?
It's an interesting topic because I'm obsessed with Dylan Gunther. I feel like I'm probably going to be talking about him on every show. So if I didn't have him and somebody threw me an offer right now, I'd probably give them almost anything for him. So that kind of speaks to your point
True.
that the market is so high on Dylan Gunther or some of these other players on that roster that you could take advantage. You could probably throw out an offer and get somebody that was maybe drafted in the second or third round back just because it's been such a hot start. So I don't hate it, but at the same time, I believe in what the Utah Hockey Club or whatever we're calling them are doing, and Dylan Gunther's leading the way right now.
Conversely, I think from the perspective of the team struggling, Edmonton, Colorado, Nashville, I think it's going to be hard to buy low right now. I think the sample size has to be a bit greater on those fronts now.
I think so. Like we're only a week into this thing, and some teams have played, 1 or 2 games. Other teams have played maybe 3 or 4 at the most. And quality of competition, I think, comes into play as well, right? Where okay, we've only seen them play 2 or 3 games. Might have been against inferior competition, or on the other side, they've played some really tough matchups out of the gate. So I think we should pump the brakes a little bit, and give it a week or two into your season before you make any major decisions here.
Patience is a virtue. We always like to say that in the fantasy hockey world. Let's get to all the injuries. The injury bug, once again, Jake, reaping its ugly head, starts in Florida with Alexander Barkov, week-to-week lower body injury. I think naturally, internally, Sam Bennett and Anton Lindell, who are on this week's list. Again, Pete Jensen coming up in mere moments to break down the waiver wire list, but those are 2 guys internally you want to look at for replacement options.
I already kind of like Sam Bennett a little bit coming into this season and his role in that top 6 in Florida. And they do have this next man up type mentality about them in Florida, right? And hey, if you're a Barkov owner, I think probably best case scenario here in terms, or close to best case scenario in terms of the injury, because it looked bad. It looked like it could be something that, we're talking months for Barkov. So for it to only be weeks, I think that's probably a win. It's a long season. And I love your mention of Anton Lundell. I just think he's a heck of a hockey player, very underrated. And if he can pick up a little bit more power play time, move his way up the lineup, they don't call him Mini Barkov for nothing, right? So Barkov's out. Time for mini Barkov to step up.
Jake, I've never heard Anton Lindell being called Mini Barkov. I'll just be honest with you.
Now you did. Now you did.
I'm loving Sam Bennett this year in a contract year. You guys know how I feel about those type of players. I'm playing the shot prop right now. He's been shooting the puck quite a bit. So look at those 2 guys specifically. I watched the first San Jose Sharks game and I'm like, wow, Macklin Celebrini has a legitimate shot, obviously, to win the Calder Trophy this season. Then poof, he's gone. And this is a week-to-week thing, lower body injury. I think San Jose, to begin with Celebrini in the lineup, Jake, would be challenged to provide offense. And I think it's going to be even harder now without the, the prize phenom. But Mikael Granlund looks like he's going to take that spot initially with Eklund and Toffoli on the top line. This is a big-time loss for San Jose.
It's too bad about Celebrini. This is why I worry about drafting these young kids in fantasy, because it's just so hard to stay durable for an 82-game season. We see it so often with these kids coming into the league and picking up some sort of injury. So I hope we get to see as much of him as possible this year, Nick. I think they already handed out the Calder, though, to Logan Stankoven. I think that's already signed, sealed, and delivered. And I'm curious your take a couple games in on Michkov as well. There was a lot of fascination with him. Have you seen anything that we can get excited about? I know it's only a couple games, but he's a flashy player.
It's a drag he's on Philadelphia. They just play this grinding style. Like Owen Tippett, I watched play junior hockey all these years. He had 8 hits over the weekend. Like, what are we doing? I know it's more conducive to winning in this league, but open it up, baby. And I think it's going to be one of those years for Michkov where there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. He's going to be in the doghouse. He's going to be in the praise books. Like, there's going to be a bit of everything. And I think that door is open, whether it's Stankoven, whether it's Lane Hudson with Montreal, who's got some points early on, Jake. I think that derby's wide open right now.
Someone I do like on Philly, though, that I say we should keep our eye on as the season goes on is Tyson Forrester. I think he was forgotten. He could be a sneaky waiver ad if you've got some injuries as well, because I really liked his game last year. He's got an NHL caliber shot, a high end elite scoring ability, and I think we all got enamored with the shiny object, right? Mitchkov comes over, he's getting some power play time. Don't forget about Forrester. I think he's going to be solidified in that top six and also get some scoring opportunities.
Other notable injuries so far in the early season, Joel Eriksson Ek with Minnesota. That's a big time loss. Sounds like it's day-to-day right now, but naturally Marco Rossi is a guy you want to identify as a replacement option. He's had a pretty good, decent start. Boone Jenner, we found out last week out indefinitely, shoulder injury. Of course, the captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets. What a win for them in Colorado on Saturday night. Sean Monahan, I mentioned it off the top of the season. I'm riding this guy in fantasy hockey. I'm riding him in betting. Thought he was great over the weekend, gets the donkey of the game for Columbus, only fitting there. Adam Fantilli's another guy with the Jackets I'd look at. And Colorado and Jonathan Drouin day-to-day. Nikolai Kovalenko, I had to double check. It's Andre's son. Remember that Cole helmet back in the
Yes.
day, Jakey?
Well, we got to look for something on Colorado here, right? I know we talked about how we're a little bit worried off the top, but someone's got to step up outside of the big dogs, and he's getting a nice line assignment up there. So I think anytime you see that, it's worth a flyer, right? Early in the season, pick him up, give him a couple games on your roster. If he finds something, he gets connected with that line. Maybe it's something that can last a little bit longer. Also, love your shout on Sean Monahan. I drafted him in a couple deep leagues. He's going to get all the minutes he can handle there in Columbus. They need someone to step up offensively, and he had himself a nice weekend.
Zach Werenski, love that shot prop right now. He's had a really, really hot start to the season as well. Unequivocally, I think now is the time to dive into the waiver wire list for week 2 as we bring in Pete Jensen from NHL.com, NHL.com/fantasy, where you can check out this week's list. What's going on, Pete? It's that time of year where I think the waiver wire probably your best friend, right?
Definitely. I think you got to look at this Utah Hockey Club, right? It's Utah's world, and we're all living in it. I saw them in living color on Thursday. I think Bob Bender was there as well. Very impressive how they were just trading blows with the Islanders and then ended up beating them in overtime. You saw the heroics again from Gunther against the Rangers. This is going to beat a lot of teams on the road. They're going to take that momentum that they inherited from the young core of Arizona, and even guys like Barrett Hayton. Barrett Hayton right now, edge stats alert, leads the NHL, tied for the lead in high danger shots on goal, and he's got 5 points in his first 3 games.
Edge stats alert. Edge stats alert. Edge stats alert, Nicholas.
Okay, can we get a siren for the edge stats alert here, guys? Or is that all we got?
Working on it.
Okay. Okay.
Not in the budget. But Pete, it's funny you bring those 2 names up because specifically, I had a bit of a conundrum getting set for this week in terms of the waiver wire. Barrett Hayton or Casey Middlestat, Pete, who would you pick?
I would probably go with Barrett Hayton because I like his line mates a lot more, Jake, right? He was playing even last year frequently with Clayton Keller, who 2 years ago had 80+ points. Last year got close with 76. Also plays with Nick Schmaltz. That's the bread and butter of the Coyotes offense, the Utah Hockey Club offense in the present. So I'm really excited that he's finally starting to see the production here. I mean, how could you have almost an 80-point scorer 2 years in a row and the one guy isn't even fantasy relevant? So I think they've stuck with him, developed that chemistry, and now he's actually like putting up the numbers that we expect.
Yeah, when I saw that line combo to start the year, I thought, okay, this is another shot for Barrett Hayton, right? Successful a couple of years ago, takes the step back, so they're giving him a chance to maybe get confident here out of the gate. Pete, Nick, and I talked a little bit earlier about the big injury in Florida. Obviously, Sasha Barkov out. Is there a couple Panthers you'd have your eye on the waiver wire, maybe to help ease the pain for Barkov owners out there?
I heard what you were saying about Anton Lindell. A lot of people forget during the Stanley Cup final run, 17 points in 24 games. He really took a big step forward as the third line center. So he's going to be elevated. And then another Stanley Cup final heroic, right? It was a hero, you could say, right? Evan Rodriguez really erupted in the goal scoring department. He's been productive early, covers shots on goal, some peripherals. So those are the guys I would look at to shoulder the load while Barkey's out. And also Kachuk was out the other day with an illness, right? That was why they lost to Buffalo.
It was. I did put money on Buffalo, by the way. Remember in last week's episode, I hit Buffalo. They lost. I doubled down, went back to Buffalo, and then I was graced with that news of Matthew Kachuk to go with Barkov. And Sabres took care of business. I've been watching a lot of Chicago as well, boys. And Pete, Teuvo Teravainen looks refreshed and rejuvenated being back with Chicago. I think it helps playing with that Bedard guy, too.
Definitely. His career high in goals, Teravainen, is only 25. I mean, he could really get up into the 30s this year in a more featured role compared to what he was doing in Carolina, where he was always right there, third, fourth, fifth best forward, at least in terms of the pecking order and stuff like that, always being bounced around from line one to line two. Look for him to gain some continuity. And yeah, I mean, Chicago, with what they did against Edmonton, and multi-point games all around the table for Chicago. So maybe look at that offense with a little bit renewed upside now that they have guys like Bertuzzi and Teravainen, and Seth Jones is healthy, Taylor Hall's healthy, and they got a lot of weapons there.
What do you think about St. Louis, Pete? I think there's some fantasy value to be had there. Obviously, we know who the top guys are, but they felt like a team that most of us were staying away from. I think there's a ton of value on Justin Falk on the back end if he's going to continue to get power play time. But is there any other maybe deeper plays in St. Louis? Any names you're looking at on the wire there?
I like Philip Broberg for assists and a little peripheral coverage, moving from Edmonton, where he was a secondary guy or a third pair guy, to where he could really step into the limelight here and produce. Dylan Holloway, we talked about on one of the previous shows. I'm high on him. Pavel Buchnevich, I know people are still flocking to him for his productivity. St. Louis has a lot of offense. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, but they strike me as one of the most impressive fringe teams based on our win projections in the offseason. They've exceeded my expectations so far, and you know that they could bring the offense, right? Even with an injury to Torrey Krug, they have the depth.
Yeah, tough go for Edmonton right now. Philip Broberg's playing over 19 minutes a night as a goal and 2 assists so far in 3 outings with the St. Louis Blues. Delivered by our good friends over at Skip. Someone writes in, is Huberdeau worth an ad? Drop Bertuzzi. Would you grab Huberdeau right now, Pete?
I would. He looks a lot better than he had in the previous 2 years when he was in the 50s in points. I was surprised by the public's confidence in Calgary. I know you guys were talking about him last show, and Connor Zary, Power Play 1, and all the Sharon Govich beneficiaries. A lot of people were saying they like that category guy, Pospisil, for hits leagues, bangers leagues. I mean, everybody was talking about how they have Uyghur. We knew they had Uyghur, like in fantasy leagues, but almost 50% of the public were saying they roster at least one Calgary player, which was really shocking to me. So maybe get back in on them with some caution here.
Another listener writes in and says, what do I do with Georgiev, with a crying emoji? So Georgiev already has fantasy owners in tears this year, guys. It's only a week into this thing. Is there anybody on the wire we can maybe look to? Like Stolarz has been a great story, and he could end up being one of the steals of a deep league in fantasy if Joe Woll continues to get hurt. Hopefully there's some other goaltenders out there that can help you out, but Georgiev already has people in tears.
I like Stolarz. I like Cam Talbot shutout in his Red Wings debut. I saw something, he's had a shutout with 7 different NHL teams, which is just absurd that he's bounced around the league that long, but he's about 50% rostered. So if you want to go deeper, definitely take a look at either a buy low window on Ilya Sorokin, because he hasn't been playing so far. I know some people are getting a little fed up with that situation. Waz going back to Colorado on Monday. That'll be interesting. If he starts Varley again, we shall see. But then look at Lucas Dostal. Nick, I know you've liked him in the past. Shutout in his first game of the year. The stage is set. John Gibson's injured. Maybe this is the time that he finally breaks out and enters the fantasy conversation. So I like Lucas Dostal around 10% rostered.
Yeah, Dostal's a tricky one, but I do like him. I just wonder about Anaheim. They had to scratch and claw to beat San Jose. They got pretty much filled in by Vegas on Sunday. I watched the majority of that game, and there's so many stops and starts. Like, it just, when are you finally going to take that next step? I think a lot of people are hoping from that perspective it happens this year, but I think the writing is on the wall at some point in time. How often have we talked about John Gibson trade rumors on this podcast? There's going to be a point in time where Lucas Dostal is the number one, so certainly would look there. Ilya Samsonov is another guy. Made his Golden Knights debut on Sunday, notches the victory in that aforementioned game against the Anaheim Ducks. I would certainly look there. Just tying up some loose ends in the back end. Oliver Ekman-Larsson running the first power play unit for the Maple Leafs. I would look there if you're looking for a defenseman. We talked about Broberg. Some other guys obviously that are big time pickups early on in the season. Dylan Guenther, we talked about that. Ivan Barbashev has been outstanding. Cam Talbot, Falk, Lane Hudson. Paul Cotter is a guy that has really caught my eye on early on, Pete. I know he's a third liner, but he's really producing right now. He was in that trade with Vegas last summer.
Yeah, we talked about him on the list last time, just kind of a glimmer after the global series, but he's keeping it going. And, even if he's in a second or third line role, change of scenery could be big for him. He never really was featured in any way for the Vegas Golden Knights, was always in their bottom six. So it's a good opportunity for him, especially with no more Toffoli in New Jersey and stuff like that. Right. There are opportunities, no more Holtz. They don't have to worry about him for the future with his disappointments. So maybe Cotter just sticks in the middle six and scores something like 25 goals with decent category coverage.
Let's turn our focus now to the betting world with a real quick look at tonight's slate and beyond. Michael Leboff from the Action Network. Leboff, great to see you once again. It's funny, earlier on in the podcast, I brought up the fact that maybe you were a year early on Andre Tierney with Utah, then Arizona, right?
Yeah, that's how it seems to work, right? Like, and he wasn't even close to the price that we were really excited about last year. He was 100 to 1. There was no Jack Adams candidate even longer than 50 to 1 at most sports books going into the year. So the sports books saw us coming, and now I would say Tourigny is rightfully seen his numbers slashed down to in the single digits, and it's probably going to stay there all year. And so yeah, tip our cap to the Bear, but we were a little early on that one, but that seems to be the case all the time in sports betting.
Are you going to keep riding Utah in the market, Leboff? We're still getting some pretty good prices on them. The Dylan Gunther shot prop, the goal prop. I think we ride it until it stops hitting.
I think that there's still a case to be made, especially when they're sitting as underdogs, decent underdogs against teams that still have questions to answer. And then that's basically everybody in the league right now. Like, we're still in the first week of the season. There's so many weird results. So any team could beat any other team. And on your point about Gunther, like, he's sitting at 100 to 1 now to win the Rocket Richard. He was not really on the board anywhere before then. And I do find that a little bit interesting, just because I think what he does is so repeatable. And is he gonna, if Austin Matthews' slow start continues and these other big name players continue to kind of sputter at the beginning of the season, he could build himself a little bit of a some runway that makes 101 price seem interesting. And it's all about the skill set more than anything. Like, I don't think he's going to win the award. He probably finishes well short of it, but it is an interesting price. And I thought it would be a little bit shorter when I saw the name start to hit the board.
Speaking of prices, do you think the market will react to tough starts for Edmonton, Colorado, Nashville? How are you playing those teams right now?
I was always on Nashville. I thought that they were a little overrated to begin with, so I'm not too surprised to see them struggle a little bit out of the gates. They're definitely a team that I'll have circled then to go back in on the other side. We start to get dealt some underdog prices on Nashville. Edmonton, I'm just going to stay away, man. I bet the Flames last night, and I was happy to see that one come through. I know that Edmonton was a little unlucky, and the scoreline definitely flattered Calgary a little bit, but when you're the Oilers, that stuff shouldn't matter. Like, if you're sitting as that big of a price, the luck shouldn't really tilt the scales too much. You're supposed to get the margin needed. As for Colorado, I do have an angle I like for tonight's game against the Islanders, that being Monday night, which is I like the first period to end scoreless. They gotta help their goaltenders here. Like, and I know it's not the defense's fault, but they have to provide like as clean and tidy an environment for their goaltenders in this game, considering how they've started the season. I think it's 8 goals on 25 shots or something like that for Georgiev. Justice Annunen hasn't been much better, and kind of in the backup role. Then you have Kaapo Kähkönen coming in, so if he gets the start, then it's his first go around as an Avalanche, and he's done he's been doing the tour, so you got to protect him as well. So I know it goes against Colorado's DNA, but I wouldn't be shocked if they come out and they say to they look at the Islanders, say, we'll just do what they do and just keep this thing as, protect the goaltenders as much as possible. And this is a really sluggish start to the game tonight.
I thought for sure you were just going to hammer your Islanders, Leboff, as dogs against a struggling Avs team. I kind of like Montreal Monday night as a home dog against the Pittsburgh Penguins, who we up and down start to the season for the Penguins. We've seen some good, we've seen some real bad, but I think the Habs are frisky. I'll call them frisky this year. They've got some good young talent on that team, and they've got off to a nice start here. So Montreal, Calgary are a couple teams I'm eager to back early in the season here.
Yeah, I like that. I like the Habs tonight too. I don't know if there's all that big of a gap between Montreal and Pittsburgh right now, right? Like, I think we could say that maybe Pittsburgh's a little bit better just based on what we saw last season, but it's not like they were miles and miles better than Montreal in 2023, 2024. And it looks like the Canadiens probably shortened that gap quite a bit. And with the goaltending that Sam Montembeault has been giving Montreal compared to the other side for Pittsburgh. I think there's more than enough here to say that Montreal should provide some value as a home underdog.
Anything else you like this week?
Like Jake, I think the Calgary Flames, there's still some meat on that bone as an underdog. The Utah Hockey Club, of course, I think everybody has circled going forward. I do think the Red Wings as a big price against the Rangers will be interesting. I don't really know if what we've seen from the Rangers to start. I know they were really good against Pittsburgh in that opener, but then very funky game against Utah. So I don't have a problem trying to take them on as a big favorite when they're a big favorite. And Detroit, I think, is the type of team that profiles well as a big underdog and not the inverse, right? That a team I want to stay away from when they are a favorite. I'll have some interest on, was it Tuesday? That would be October the 15th. I'm circling that Blues Wild game as well. I think that Minnesota is so banged up. If we get St. Louis as like a pick 'em at home, I'm kind of interested there. And then I think I'm gonna bet the Flyers against the Oilers. Like, is there a worse team you want to face in that situation than like, I know the answer is probably yeah, like the Dallas Stars or Florida Panthers. But if you're Edmonton, wouldn't you just kind of want like a nice sleepy night at the office rather than a team that's just gonna go after you like a dog on the bone, like the Flyers will? And so I'll have some interest, I think, in the Flyers, and I expect the betting market to flood with money for Edmonton, as people just can't wrap their mind around them starting the season 0-4. So I think you'll get a really, really good price on Philadelphia, team that always punches up well as an underdog.
And Mike, last one from me. Celebrini goes down to injured reserve. Does this benefit Will Smith's chances at the Calder Trophy? We were talking earlier, Stankoven, Lane Hudson, probably the two guys at the top of the list right now. But curious if you have a sleeper for the Calder in light of the Celebrini injury.
Jake's heard me bang this drum all summer, but I still like Max Siplikov at 60-1. Like, it's just he has a lot more to overcome than the other guys because of the age. Right, voters just don't want to give the Calder to someone who's that old. But if he sticks in that second line or even bumps his way up to that first line at points and plays on that first power play unit for the Islanders, like he seems like he's going to get every opportunity here. He's already got a goal. He's shown that he can kind of play. So the better way to play it might be to back him to finish with the rookie goal lead, which kind of pops up in and out of the season. He was 30-1 a couple weeks ago. So I still like Siplikov a little bit, but like you said, I think that what we're going to see is this turn into a little bit of a 2-horse race until Celebrini comes back, and for Hudson and Stankoven. Maybe Hudson becomes a runaway favorite at some point pretty soon here too.
Leboff, you always bring the heat. Thanks so much for this.
You got it, guys.
Michael Leboff, Action Network. Check him out on Line Change Pete. We're waiting for your pick of the week here, buddy. Let's hear it.
Pick of the week. I mean, I think, Jack Eichel, wanted to give him a shout out. Nobody ever gives him any love for MVP conversation. He's leading the league in points right now. Look for him to keep the good fortunes going. Jack Eichel for a goal at Washington on Tuesday. And I just feel like he just gets overlooked. I know he was in the NHL commercial, right, the other day for the Gen Z crowd and stuff like that. That was a really good spot, by the way. I have to give the league props for that one. But yeah, he was sitting by the pool. He's won the cup before, little pressure off his back. And I think that Jack Eichel is going to have a monster year, maybe 100 points.
I like it. I enjoyed him in the Amazon docuseries, and they highlighted him as well. I thought he was great. Some looks I like this week: Utah, New Jersey, Monday. I like a Jack Hughes anytime goal. Hasn't happened through 4 games so far. I like the Florida, Boston under on Tuesday, Tampa, Vancouver. I'm going to ride the Vancouver money line. It's been a couple days off for the Lightning. I like Carolina at home against New Jersey, and I think Austin Matthews, Jake, finally scores on Wednesday against LA.
It's about time. I mean, if you feel like once he gets one, he's probably going to get 2 or 3. So maybe even hit him for multiple goals. Just a little sprinkle on that, right? Maybe a half unit on Matthews for multiple goals, because I think they'll come in bunches once they do come. Pete, I like the shout on Jack Eichel. I think very sneaky flyer for the Hart Trophy, maybe. But let's not forget Nikita Kucherov is still Nikita Kucherov, and he had a monster first game, and you can still find some pretty good prices on him to win the Hart Trophy this year. So I think as from a future bet, bet perspective, I like that. Monday night, Montreal, mentioned it, home dog. And I will go with Leboff's Islanders. And, we're going to be talking on Thursday, and maybe it gets even worse in Colorado before it gets better.
Yeah, they need a save desperately due to the Colorado Avalanche. Last but not least, let's look at the schedule. 49 games in total this week. The 4-game teams you want to look at on the waiver wire: Colorado, Florida, LA Kings, New Jersey, Pittsburgh, San Jose. Of those 6 teams, 3, I like the schedules. Colorado's got the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So does Pittsburgh. And then Los Angeles has a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday. The 2-game teams: Calgary, Toronto, Minnesota, Winnipeg. Any last thoughts, Pete?
I wanted to mention and give a shout out to a big victory for Columbus that you referenced earlier against Colorado. They have a homestand coming up. It's going to be emotional, no doubt about it. Igor Chinakhov was a guy based on his edge metrics last year. It really indicated that he was going to break out this year, and he's got 4 points in his first 2 games, including 2 on the power play. So look for Chinakhov over this upcoming homestand to really erupt here.
You hear the shovel hitting the dirt, digging deep with Pete Jensen, digging real deep. Put a bow on it, Nicholas.
Coming up this week on Thursday, week 2 mailbag edition. So we'll talk then. For Jay Con and Pete Jensen, I'm Nick Alberga. Many thanks to producer Bob Bender, as you heard there. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.